I think the future is interactive in music, and a lot of what seems like the location for growth in music is not just listening to music, not just going to concerts, but music with X, music with this other piece. And again, it could be fitness, it could be gaming, it could be wellness, it could be food.
There is one podcast that I listen the most to when it comes to the music industry, and that is the Music Tectonics podcast. The host is Dmitri. He is the founder of Rock, Paper, Scissors, a PR company for music and music tech and creativity. He is one of the most knowledgeable people I know and have heard of, and he brings so much gold on this episode. Hey guys, and welcome back to Sound Connections. Today I have a great guest in the studio. Dmitri, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jacob. Excited to be here.
I've been looking forward to this, Dmitri. I've been listening to your podcast for a while. I think I started listening to your podcast way before I started my own. And in some way, I consider you as someone who's gone before me and still is running and have higher quality than I have. So I look very much up to you.
I appreciate that, man.
But what is interesting about podcast hosts is there's often like a story behind them, their mind, what they go through, what they think that is really interesting. And one of the things that I've been missing for a lot of the podcasts I listen to is having the opportunity to understand the host that I listen so much to. And
Nice.
This is my free space to do exactly that. So welcome and thank you.
Absolutely. No, I'm excited to have this conversation. And I don't talk to other hosts of podcasts on music tech usually either. So it'll be fun.
There's very few of us. Dmitri, we both work in a very interesting space. Music tech is something that I have sort of ventured into the last 5 years, and I'm extremely passionate about it. But what you do through Rock, Paper, Scissors, which is your company, a PR company, and also Music Tectonics, and your podcast, is that you talk about, well, you communicate the worth of startups, you communicate their brands, everything they stand for in a way that they can cut clear into the world. And one of the things that I experience a lot with companies that I consult is that is one of the hardest things to do, is really saying, okay, this is what I do, this is how I package it, this is how I bring it to both customers and the industry. Before I go into that whole long talk, because I'm so fascinated about what you do, could you, for my sake and for the listeners' sake, just spend a minute just introducing what you do and what you've done in the past?
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, so my name is Dmitri Vietze. Vietze rhymes with pizza. That helps people remember. And, I started Rock, Paper, Scissors, our PR and marketing firm, back in 1999. We started as a PR firm that helped artists, international artists, actually break into the United States. And I was always really interested in using technology to run my business. And so we built our own technology to run the company. And then I joined a music tech accelerator myself and tried my hand at being a startup. I launched a company called storyamp.com, which helps independent artists get press for their concerts, tours, and their releases. So kind of automating the PR process. Back then we were watching Uber take over ride, taxi service, and Airbnb take over where hotels left off. And so I thought, somebody's going to do that for PR. So we did that for music PR with StoryAmp, which is still running today. But as a result, I really learned a lot about the ins and outs of the music industry, around music tech companies, around startups, and trying to solve problems with technology. So we started at Rock, Paper, Scissors getting asked to do PR for other music tech startups. And that's kind of how that came together, basically. So now we're a 15-person team. We get hired by music innovation companies. A lot of them are music tech startups, but some are scale-ups, some are corporate as well. Just because we know the industry well and know how to do storytelling and help these different companies get the word out about what they do, help them establish thought leadership. And now we also do other types of marketing as well. So we can help with all kinds of things from, SEO and content marketing to social video creations, influencer management, and Kickstarter management, and beyond.
I have a question, Dmitri. I want to know what your thoughts are on the status of the music tech world right now. What is happening? Is it a strong industry? Is it something that's developing? Like, what's your take on it? Is it strong?
Yeah. I mean, what's happening is, I think music tech was I mean, the earliest music tech was really musical instruments, right? So there's an entire industry on the music creation side, whether it's physical hardware or software or virtual instruments, and also new forms of music making. So there's a whole category there that's been around for hundreds of years, really, but has become, I think, grown with, kind of the digital creator opportunities that technology have brought. And then there's the traditional record industry, let's call it. And by record, I mean recording, not vinyl. But on top of that is sort of the marketing, distribution, and enjoyment of music that goes with that. It's not just making the record. It's not just the A&R, but it's putting out the music and finding fans, interacting with fans and listeners, enjoying music in various forms at this point. And so I would say the state of the music tech or music innovation space is big and diverse right now. However, it's so diverse, there's a lot of players involved. And if you look at the investment side of the business, it hasn't grown. It's been really rocky for music tech investment. So you don't have the same type of venture capital mindset for much of the music side of technology. If you widen it out to media tech or entertainment or, there's other ways, like categories you could put music tech as part of, it starts to look more like relevant, which has an impact on how music tech companies think about how specific their product or service is. If you can widen it out beyond music so that we see a lot that are expanding into music and wellness, music and fitness, music and gaming, these other verticals that have larger total addressable markets. I think it opens up a lot of conversation doors. That being said, there's a lot of problems to be solved in the music industry. So there's a lot of very unique things about the music industry, even different than, say, film and TV, which you would think, or books, which you would think would be like other forms of traditional media that are making the digital transformation before our eyes. But the rights and the A&R and the ownership and kind of how the history and even the legal history of the music industry has an impact on where you can go with music tech. So it's not a super easy industry to have a startup in, but that also means that you could have a bit of a moat if you're successful, because it's hard for others to get far along as well.
I want to dissect a bit what you're talking about. One of the things that I've been very focused on lately is the investor aspect of music and music tech. Because I want to figure out what is going wrong. Is it communication? Is it a lack of track record? Is it that there's simply just there's like an evil circle of not being invested, therefore there's not enough success stories? What's your analysis of what's going wrong or what has gone wrong that has put us in this position as an industry?
I mean, I don't know if anything's going wrong necessarily, but I think that there were in the early VC days of tech, there were some people who treated music just like anything else. They put money in, they invested, and then they didn't get the payouts they were looking for or at all. And so people got kind of gun shy about the music industry. Part of that is because some of the founders and some of the investors just weren't realistic about the music industry. So it kind of put a bit of a stain on the reputation of music as an investable entity. The other piece of this goes back to what happened in the music industry in this transformation to digital, which is it was very hard to monetize music. And that reputation has kind of stayed there with the technology side of music. You'll see there's plenty of investment happening with catalogs, with IP, with publishing and record labels and things like that. There's plenty of investment on the publishing side because investors see a long-term return on that creative IP. So there's money in the space. It's just harder to translate sometimes how one company's technological workflow will get mass adoption and be able to leapfrog over some of the both legal and ethical complications of how the music industry operates. There's also some really well-established players around how musical IP is exploited, and they have a way of doing things, whether it's for legal reasons or process reasons. And it's just very slow to change. The other thing, Jacob, is I think, we heard on our podcast when we interviewed a VC named Juliet Rolnick from BDMI that the total addressable market for music is just smaller than a lot of the other industries. So if you want to do creative and media stuff, you just hop over to gaming, right? Or if you want to do wellness stuff, you go to med tech. If you want to do financial stuff, you go to fintech or cybersecurity. And, you just have much bigger markets, much bigger potential for investments and companies. And I think that's just been tricky. I think there's still plenty of room in music. It's just you're partly doing it out of the passion. And as a result, you have to expect that there's going to be some challenges that exist there that are different than in other markets.
And I think all of these arguments makes a lot of sense. You see a lot of companies, you see a lot of examples, you talk with a lot of investors. What do you believe must happen over time consistently to make this more attractive for investors to invest in?
I think there's a lot of great ideas in music that don't really take into account where the financial exchange happens. And, if you're in this because you're a super fan or because you're an artist yourself or you're just excited about music and entertainment, you come up with some really cool ideas. There's a lot of innovative ideas around fan engagement or monetization even, or new form factors or, live performance. There's so many different directions you can go with very cool ideas. But if people or companies are not used to or willing to part with the first penny for the experience that you're creating, it's very difficult to convince investors. And so I think the thing that will get us past that is if founders are just more realistic about how far that their idea can go. And it's really vetting the idea a little bit more strongly. And some of that, as Cliff Flouet said on one of our early How to Startup podcasts, is, which was about like, is your idea any good? It was kind of like the earliest stage conversation about this, is to think about like, what are some parallel verticals that you can be operating in at the same time, or possibly test marketing. Sometimes people don't want to see it test marketed in music because of this past reputation for investment returns. And so if you can put it into sports and athletics, if you can put it into medical or even advertising, like ad tech or something like that, and demonstrate that it works elsewhere, then you bring it back and say, what, because people in music love to say, why are we doing it like so-and-so, like such and such industry and so forth. And so as a startup, you can actually leverage that to your advantage, make it work elsewhere, and then you create some FOMO within music as well. So I guess to answer your question, it's really like, I think it's because there's a lot of great ideas, but they're not great businesses. And so music tech founders have to make sure that they're thinking about the second, third, fourth phases, not only of investment, but of monetization, of what's going to sustain this and so forth. I hate to keep referring back to people I've interviewed on my podcast, but like you, I'm learning from
No, this
people.
is good.
It's a great excuse. And Vicky Nauman, on one of her recent interviews, pointed out that there have been different phases of investment. And at the beginning, all you had to do was show that you were going to reach 100 million users, and you could figure out how to monetize it later. And then after that, there was a phase where you had to demonstrate that there was a monetization model. Like just make sure that we can see, like, if you were to grow, how are people going to be paying you? And now she's like, no, you actually have to be cash flow positive. You can't just say, we're going to attract people, or you can't just attract people. And you can't just say, look, we've shown our first transactions to happen, so now we just need to add fuel to the fire. You actually have to be cash flow positive, which means not only do you have to bring in enough users, but you have to bring in enough users who are willing to pay, and they have to be paying, enough to start to offset your burn rate.
I'm sort of interpreting your words a bit. You said a minute ago about founders need to be more focused on the business, and there's too many ideas out there that probably isn't great businesses. Do you think that stems from there's so much passion in this industry? There's so much passion to the product?
I mean, I'm sure it happens in a lot of different industries. But music is one of the most popular forms of media. I mean, it drives a lot of even what happens in film and TV, right? The the story has to be good, the set has to be good, the directing has to be good, but the music always adds the emotional element. It's the emotional layer. It's the part that makes your heart just like jump right in. Any movie without music would be a whole different experience, and that's crazy to think about. But you could say the same for social video, right? Like, what would social video be without music? It's like missing so many elements at that point, and it's what it draws on people's like sense of identity and their sense of purpose. And just like you think about a soundtrack in a film or TV, it's like your soundtrack to life, literally. You know what I mean? Like, people want something specific music to study to walk to exercise to cook to entertain to dance to. Like, you have a soundtrack for everything there. So I just think that humans are wired for sound to be this extra layer on top of everything else. And so as a result, it creates a lot of passion. Is that passion the reason people come up with not business friendly ideas? I just think the standards are higher. The bar is higher for music because of past failures. I also think like we go through these phases of development and maturity of how people ingest music, listen to music, whether it's various physical formats. I mean, if you look at the history of all the different formats of music that have occurred, it is like this ridiculous cycle. And some people have even criticized it to say that it's actually exploitative to the consumer, to say, okay, you have all your records, but you know what's cool? 8 tracks are cool, or cassettes are cool, or, now you need to replace everything on CD. And then, after that whole thing, oh, wait, it's free, but there's been these cycles. And so the industry has gotten used to like quickly moving to a new format and then growing it, maturing it, building out tools for it, and so forth. And we're kind of at the peak of streaming in a sense, right? Like, the revenue that's come in as a result of the streaming era is kind of, it could grow a little bit, but it's not going to hockey stick or skyrocket the way each format had previously. So we're at an interesting place in terms of time as well, where there's a maturity where I think it's going to have to be a significant breakthrough that will drive new revenue. And so we're at a complicated time in that sense. You know what I mean? People they're now leaning on streaming the way they were leaning on CDs. The industry is like, yep, we're back. It's good. Everything's good. Please don't screw with it. Everything is fine. Nothing else is needed. And so there's a lot of fear about like what kind of innovation will happen. And actually most of the innovation really is, I mean, as cliche as it is, it really is disruptive, right? Like, the next thing in music is about interactivity and experience with music rather than just passively listening to it. And nobody's really cracked the nut. There's a whole other revolution happening on the creativity, the creation of music. And I'm not just talking about AI. It doesn't have to be AI, but those tools certainly can help make a non-musician a musician in a sense, like a creator of new musical content, or a curating creator or something, because, there's not as much, sometimes in some of the tools, there's not as much actual creative production happening. But I think like it's going to be, this next phase is it's going to take a couple of cycles here to make it make money as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are some of the ideas it brought up for me.
It does. And, as a relatively young entrepreneur, I'm 30 years old, and I've sort of been an entrepreneur for 12 years and 5 years fully in like tech-related products. And I'm sort of very curious about what my future holds in this industry, because there's this one side that is like very optimistic about revenue increasing, different models being introduced. But the other side is the history of this being a very small industry with like limited opportunities. And so like I'm preaching the gospel of entrepreneurship, but sometimes I really doubt, like, is this really the right industry to do it in? Because I almost feel like I'm fooling myself and the people around them, like, this is something we should focus on. And obviously we should, because we love music and want to do a difference in it. But it speaks to the thing that you said, like, there's big economies, there's big opportunities probably in other creator economies than music. I'm curious, Dmitri, everything I read about you, everything I see about you is about music. And you very well know that there's most likely more opportunities, or could be more opportunities in other creator economies. What's the reason that you stick so much to music? What is it that drives you there?
I mean, what's happened in the past may not be what happens in the future. Because I'm on my own path as well, like
Yeah.
I'm facing the same questions at times, and you know, taking different paths down different alleys and roads and rabbit holes as well. And I think the reason I've stuck with it is because it's what I know. You know what I mean? I grew up playing music as a kid, and then moved to New York for my teenage years and played music in the subways, and went to a high school for music and the arts in New York City, the Fame High School. And then I got very involved with kind of community activism, and then figured out how to sort of use music towards that goal as well. But then really enjoyed the storytelling of music, helped international artists tell their cultural stories through music. And then innovation has always been a part for me. And so then I went down this other alley around innovation in music. And it's just been a blast. I feel like I'm learning so much all the time, like I because of the types of interviews we do on the podcast, or speakers we host at the Music Tectonics conference in LA, or just the clients or the potential clients. I'm hearing about, I actually can hear about trends before they're reported out in the press, because there's companies that are doing stuff that haven't launched yet, and they're talking to me about what their perspective is on ethical AI, or digital avatars, or what the future of spatial computing looks like and how that affects music. And it's just it's very exciting. I mean, like, for me as an entrepreneur, Jacob, like, it's all about curiosity and just pulling that thread of curiosity. So it's almost like, I don't know if it's an innately human trait, but it's certainly one that I think a lot of us get hooked into, is like, what are we curious about? How do we learn more? I mean, for me, it started with like, what are the weird sounds that different musical instruments make, and how do they make them? And it's just, then you get, as an entrepreneur, you start to focus on the financial and the business aspects, and you're like, okay, so what are the weird sounds that these business models make? You know what I mean? Like, what are the origins of this strategy of channel sales, or partner management, or content marketing? Like, they're their own timbral elements as well. So like, I think to some extent it's like, why? I don't know. It's my life. It's what I do. It's what I'm passionate about. And I've attracted a bunch of people on my team who are in the same boat. They're either artists or super fans or journalists, storytellers, or just good marketers who like to be part of the larger culture as well. That being said, I do think it's in both of our best interest to think bigger than what we do, and to keep an eye on things. You have to have like peripheral vision as an entrepreneur as well, because if you just go straight, you might not realize that there's galloping tigers next to you on either side. You kind of have to keep an eye on other industries, and there's a lot of overlap and a lot of, I think, benefit from how those concentric industries can support music and vice versa. I mean, again, I think the future is interactive in music, and a lot of what seems like the location for growth in music is not just listening to music, not just going to concerts, but music with X, music with this other piece. And again, it could be fitness, it could be gaming, it could be wellness, it could be food. Because, we no longer live a life where we stop and put a record on and sit there and listen and don't like space out. That's not how life operates anymore. And so music has to be able to kind of fluidly move along with how people are experiencing the world as well. So I think looking at those parallel universes is critical. Doesn't mean you give up on music necessarily. It just means either you see what's working there, like we talked about earlier in the conversation, or you look for other opportunities as well. Just because you're not a one-track human. Nobody is. You have other interests, and the world is changing, and you might want to see what else is popping onto other people's radars too. You learn from other people's passions and curiosities, and there could be entrepreneurial opportunities for you there too, Jacob.
Yeah, they could, and I'm very curious about it. One of the things that intrigues me about the music industry in particular is the complexity in the relationships and how much they matter. Like, one of the things that I've realized through this podcast is, I haven't changed much of what I do as an entrepreneur. I've been working with startups for a good time, and I've been able to raise money. I've been able to build companies. But when I started the podcast, suddenly my career started to explode and the opportunities. And
True.
why? Just because it's such a relationship game, and people assume that because I'm associated to some people, then I'm worth something. And what I'm trying to say is, when I speak to colleagues that are startups in other industries and stuff, this relationship game that we're playing seems different. It seems different. And that's why I think it's particularly interesting, because you navigate into a space that is so much about the complexity between humans, more than, at least from the outside, it seems from other industries.
True.
And that's why I'm so curious about it, because it seems like a game almost that you need to try to win in the relationship space. Sorry, that's sort of my own.
No. I mean, I agree about the importance of relationships. I don't know about how it varies from industry to industry. I do think that people come to the music industry mostly out of passion. And so there's an emotional timbre in those interactions of those relationships that's probably different than, I don't know, equipment sales, cybersecurity. There's a reason that some people are passionate and become thought leaders within those industries, but it feels like everyone in music is pretty much passionate about something that's musical. Because otherwise they probably would find a different industry to work in. And, for our role at Rock, Paper, Scissors, we see ourselves as storytellers, but the intent of the storytelling is to inspire people and to activate networks. And that's really what you're talking about with relationships. It's like, how do you build your network so that you can help other people, help yourself, help your business? And that's a lot of what we're thinking about. Even though we might be pitching a press release or trying to secure a story in an outlet, ultimately we want the goal to be to inspire the people who are seeing that media, or to activate networks of people through our events, for example, to get the people who will make a difference for the entrepreneurs we're working with to make a difference in their business. So I think I agree. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you about the relationship side. I just don't know how to compare it to other industries.
No. And I also just know it based on conversations of other entrepreneurs from other industries, and that's what I have from it.
Yeah.
Dmitri, I'm curious, because you've been running Rock, Paper, Scissors for a good while, and then you did the sort of the startup yourself and really started to deep dive into music tech. And then you started something quite significant, the Music Tectonics conference. Could you walk me through what sort of sparked that idea and what has happened in the last couple of years with that?
As a startup and as a PR firm, my best lead generation channel was always conferences from the beginning. Since 1999, I'd actually go to Europe to go to a conference to meet record labels and festivals and artists and get them as PR clients. And, I had my business coaches over time, my Jacobs of the world that would help me with my business. And I did an analysis of kind of like, where do our leads come from? How are we generating new work? And we generate the most interest by attending these networks, these conferences where the relevant, right people would gather. And so I started putting more emphasis. When you first start going to an industry conference, you're like, okay, I got to spring for a badge. This is kind of a big deal, a flight, a hotel, a badge, food, all that stuff. Like, well, that's kind of an investment of itself when you're first starting. And then you might say, well, how do I get on stage, right? And you invest some energy in trying to figure that out. Sometimes that means you might sponsor a conference. Even a low-level sponsorship will put you kind of on the map in a way that, as a scrappy startup, at first you're like, that's stupid. That's just about hype. And it's like, well, wait a second. It's actually about attracting people to you, letting people know you're there. You're elevated above the crowd by saying, I have something to say, I have something to show, etc. So we did all that stuff, and we figured out which conferences worked really well for us in the music industry, in the tech space, in investment, in culture. And then we started doing meetups at various places. We'd usually partner with another organization like 2112 in Chicago, or there's a great New York music tech meetup we partnered with, or Project Music was an incubator in Nashville that we partnered with. And then we started doing our own, organizing our own, either at existing conferences. Sometimes we'd go through the formal process, et cetera. Point being, we got a lot of great business out of it, and it was fun. It was part of that musical vibe of being together in person and networking and, meeting people. So what's the next step, right? Organize your own conference. We noticed there was nothing around music tech and innovation in Los Angeles, but we also saw that the record labels were renovating their offices with the growth of streaming. The streaming services were opening up offices in LA. There was already gaming companies, social media companies, hardware companies. It was just like Hollywood. It's right there. It's like these convergences of all these things that I see as the future of music tech and music innovation. We're all right there. And so we started the conference because we like building community as a way of creating relationships. It's like you starting your podcast. And the first thing we did even before the first conference was start the Music Tectonics podcast, because we needed to start to create a channel, a way to have conversations around these things and start to kind of put a shingle out there globally to say, oh, you're interested in music tech and innovation? Come learn about us. Come be a part of our conference. Come speak. Come demo. Come compete in our pitch competition, etc. So that's kind of how it happened, and it's just been a blast. We're going to be October 22nd to 24th. It's our 6th year. I can tell you more about the conference if you want, but that's how we got there.
No, I would love to hear more about it, because I'm so fascinated about the concepts of conference. I also experience conferences being very different in vibe and quality and purpose. And one of the things that you guys do, which I think is extremely interesting, is being so innovation focused, where a lot of conferences that I've been to aren't that so much.
Yeah.
And there's room for that and place for that, but your focus in particular is very interesting. Can you go into depth between what happened? How did you launch it? How did you see the growth over time?
I guess I should say I had a career organizing conferences long before I was in the music industry. So one of my first jobs out of school was helping an educational organization here in Portland, Oregon, where I used to live and recently moved back to, organize a large 2,000 person conference. And so I learned just sort of the mechanics of that. And then one of our clients of many years, CD Baby, wanted to start a conference called the DIY Musician Conference. And they said, Dmitri, you seem to know something about conferences. Why don't you guys help us organize this conference? So we organized their conference for, I think, the first 5 years. And that was a large 1,000+ person conference as well. And so we kind of, just got trained up on how to do it in the music industry as well. And we were servicing a totally different audience than them. Theirs was oriented towards DIY artists for the most part, and artists they distribute and that sort of thing. And so, I already had spent a career's worth of time organizing conferences. So it kind of just made sense.
And was there immediate interest in it? Was the response from the music tech community immediate?
It was, in the sense that we had over 400 attendees at the first event, and we're cash flow positive. So I call that a success. Wow. That's about
Absolutely.
what we were aiming for. And each year it's grown. Last year we're just almost hit 600, so we're expecting more this year as well. Those aren't huge numbers. That's not like South by Southwest numbers or ADE numbers, but we don't have a festival component either. We're just the business meetings component, although it's super fun. It's on the beach, and we do some cool stuff like take over a carousel and have startups demo around the carousel. We do some cool stuff. But it was successful in that sense. I didn't lose my shirt on it. I see some growth areas for it. I think we're going to start probably experimenting with some announcements later this year to see about how we could grow it out a little bit more as well. The other thing that we did that was really important to me from the beginning was to focus on not just saying, hey, music tech startups, come to this conference, because there's definitely value in founders talking to founders. Absolutely. And there's value to finding the consultants and the studios and the attorneys and so forth that want to work with startups. But there's also value if there's legitimate investors in the room, record labels, managers, streaming services, social media platforms that these startups are also building products and service for as well. So we've not tried to grow purely with the music tech founders, because we want those VIP execs, decision makers, influential people in the industry to keep showing up. Because I've seen other conferences where they start out pretty good, but eventually it's like you're kind of just not having enough of those decision makers there to make it valuable to be there. It's like critical for us to think long term about making sure that there's value for everyone who buys a badge. Because even though the badges are only like $200, $300, $400 to go to, which I think is one of the cheapest in the industry, it's an investment. People have to fly there. They have hotels, they have or Airbnbs, they have time that put into it. We just want them to get value and keep coming back. So that's been the most challenging thing, is to keep that perfect balance. And I think we're doing all right.
Absolutely. Like for the people in my space I talk with, Music Tectonics is one of them that they talk the highest and best about. Dmitri, I'll let you go soon. This has been sort of a gold mine of information, but I do want a bit more of gold. And you said 10, 15 minutes ago that you get to hear about innovations before they happen. You get to see trends before they unfold. For the entrepreneurs listening to this podcast, can you give us some insights to what you believe is going to happen in the future in this space? Like very specifically, what area is going to grow? Where is innovation going to happen? What would be a good idea pursuing businesses in?
Yeah, sure. I think there's several categories where I think we're already, as soon as I say these things, people are going to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So they're not like super secret or anything like that. It's more just about like how you curate all the information that's coming your way. And I mentioned a little bit about this before, but I think the biggest trend that I'm really keeping an eye on is the explosion of musical creativity, meaning opportunities and tools for more people to be making music, or to be musical, or to integrate music into what they do, or to blur the lines between whether you are a creator or a, quote, consumer of musical content. I think that's going to continue to shift. It's sort of the origin story of the Instagrams of the world was around photography, right? And around static images. Yeah. And the origin stories around YouTube, and then eventually Vine/TikTok was around video and video editing and making it so easy that people could make this short form content that was as sticky as a Hollywood film. You're watching TikTok for hours and hours at a time now instead of Netflix. And that really hasn't happened to music yet until now. I mean, part of it is a camera, whether it's still or video movement, is capturing other things, right? You can turn it on and just start capturing something. In the case of music, you can turn on an audio recorder, but no music is going to show up in there, So it's been complicated to actually create the technology where somebody who doesn't have music lessons or who doesn't want to follow a traditional music learning path can start to create music. Everyone had a camera in their pocket as soon as they had a phone, and now everyone's going to have a musical instrument in their pocket as soon as they have a phone. And there's other new form factors. The video game industry, the cell phone industry has brought down the prices of these physical parts as well. So you have this musical instrument renaissance where you're starting to see lots of new types of finger drumming and synths and samplers and all sorts of fun stuff like that as well. So I think like one of my focus areas is to just think about this convergence of the traditional, let's make a song and make it popular industry and record it and get it out there, with the like creativity and the creator economy and all that kind of stuff. I don't love the phrase creator economy because it sounds so generic, but what we've seen happen with film and video and other things like cooking and writing books and so forth is that the tools haven't been there for music until very recently, in my opinion. Even though the laptop, the bedroom producer transformed the music industry, it's really hasn't gotten the same level of access as the video and photography, in my opinion. So that's emerging right now, and I think it's going to continue to change. So that's a big one. Yeah. The next one I want to mention is fandom as a concept has been around. I mean, as a kid, I saw old black and white video of Beatles fans going crazy for Beatlemania, and heard about the British rock invasion and all that kind of stuff as well. But in terms of like the current digital experience of music, there's a layer of interaction of fandom that hasn't really matured yet. And I think that's another really interesting area. It's tricky right now. Remember earlier we were talking about the level of maturity of the streaming era makes it hard for people to break in as one of the things. streaming services have not had a lot of luck of making listening to music as social as it could be. You know, the Twitches of the world have, but they're not music centric necessarily. You know, music is almost like a sidebar to Twitch. Gaming is like a central piece there. So I think there's something's going to emerge with fandom. There's companies that got into kind of like audio social that are starting to see new things happen. And there's a company called Stationhead that's been around for a while, but now is like blowing up in terms of the way that artists and fans can interact with each other. And they're working in parallel with music streaming service. They've actually gamified music streaming because artists or even fans will come on and say, we need to get back on the charts. Help us, power some streams, and then listen to music together. And it influences all these people streaming music at the same time. So that's like an interesting type of layer of fandom. But there's all sorts of fan experiences that people want to have that need kind of tools built for them. And you can see in the music industry news, the trade press, record labels are talking about fandom, investments in fandom and things like that as well. So those are a couple of them. I do think the social video thing, we're in the midst of this TikTok Universal Music standoff, which is complicating things for music's relationship with TikTok. TikTok wasn't the first to do it, and they might not be the last. There may be existing players, the YouTubes or the Instagrams of the world, that sort out some sort of algorithmic shift that could lead people back to their platforms, or it could be a company we haven't even heard of yet. So I think that's a space to watch. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to play out. The main thing I would say is TikTok might not be the end story for this social video phenomenon. I don't think the phenomenon is going to go away by any means. And then I guess the other topic, just to throw one more at you for now, would be, there's this category that I would combine all together. People don't like to combine augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, metaverse, avatars, and spatial computing. But the whole idea that there's going to be a growth of content, interactive experiences that will mess with our reality, whether it's virtual or augmented, I don't know, but that will mess with our reality, that will allow us to have new types of experiences that feel like you're in your body but aren't actually in person, is, I think, under indexed in terms of how people are thinking about it. When Facebook got into calling themselves Meta, I think it kind of made it hard for people to perceive where this could go. There was a little too much doubt about Facebook owning the entire concept of metaverse. And I don't personally think metaverse has to be blockchain or metaverse has to be virtual or anything, but I think the idea that there will be virtual or digital spaces that may not have been created yet and experiences, I think there's a lot of potential there in the future. And I do think that Apple is going to do things differently than Oculus or Facebook did. I don't know. Again, I still think, having the big thing on your face, it's not a blast. It's not great. It's not a great user experience, but contact lenses would be, yeah. And I think the bigger issue was just making content accessible, making those types of experiences accessible is something that Apple could crack in a way that Facebook couldn't. Apple built the original App Store that everyone's built their app stores around. They've been great about incentivizing app developers to create these types of experiences if they can pull it off with people wearing headsets. I wouldn't put any doubts against them on that. Obviously, the price is going to have to come down a lot. But I also don't think you need to have a headset to have a metaverse or a virtual experience. There's browser-based things where you're in a world. And I think there's some opportunities there for music that are really scalable. It's just a little bit matter of time. It's just making those tools of capture or creation of those experiences more affordable so that people can jump in, or creating venues like that people can just tap into without having to build their own, things like that. So those are some of my kind of trends that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. Some of them I know are not that mind-blowing, like you've been hearing about them for several years. But I think sometimes we jump too quickly from one idea to another one anyway. And you need time to develop these things. These things can mature, the business models can shift, and the public interest in their appetite for these things can grow over time as well.
Dmitri, this has been an absolute goldmine, and I've just been enjoying kicking back and listening to your stories, listening to your insight. You are probably one of the people in the world who has the most insight on what's happening and what's going through music tech.
Wow.
So I'm very honored to get that talk with you, and I really will encourage listeners to go to your podcast, Music Tectonics podcast. There's so much gold. You even had yesterday you had an event with the previous Music Tech Stars leader that I couldn't attend. I couldn't attend it, and I actually felt bad about it. So that's the level of content you're providing. So thank you so much for doing this, and thank you so much for putting so much out there that's so easily accessible. Dimitri, it's been a pleasure. I do count on being at Music Tectonics this year, so I hope I get to meet you and give you a handshake or a hug, whatever you prefer.
I'll take a hug, yeah.
Great.
Oh, this has been a blast, Jacob. Thank you so much. I'm rarely on this side of the mic, and it's super fun. I appreciate you giving me a chance to talk a little bit about some of my ideas, and it was a blast. Great questions, and I'm looking forward to continuing to listen to the podcast as well.
Thank you, man. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks.